This took me over 30 years in golf to learn, and I'll teach it to you in less time than it takes to watch an episode of The Office. The 25 lessons I'm sharing with you took me way too long to realize. And I want to help you save some time so that you can lower your scores efficiently. When you're practicing at the range, keep your basket of balls behind you, and here's why. If you go to a PGA Tour tournament and watch players practice, you're going to notice a few habits. The first is that before they hit any shot, they are standing behind the ball. They're visualizing their target. They are setting their shot intention. And then they're going to go through some type of rehearsal that they would go through when they're actually playing. Then they're going to align themselves and get over the ball and go through the same exact process that they would do on the golf course. After they hit the shot, the work is not over. They're going to take a step back, maybe look at some TrackMan or Foresight GC quad data, have a conversation with their caddy, but it's not rushed or hurried, and they are more importantly absorbing the right feedback against their intentions for the shot. Now, if you go to any driving range and you look at normal golfers, what they're doing, you're just gonna see them standing in the same spot, raking balls to the same position over and over again. There's really not much thought or process behind it. So a simple thing you could do is put the basket of balls behind you. It will kind of force you to go through this process of picking a target, setting your intention, going through that alignment, and more importantly, taking a step back after each shot to kind of absorb the feedback and see if you need to make any adjustments. This is something really simple that all of you can add to your practice sessions that will help bridge that gap between the golf course and the range, which I know is a problem for most golfers. A really simple way to lower your scores strategically is to aim away from trouble when the golf course allows it. Here's what I mean by that. So if you have a hole that has out of bounds or water on one side and then just rough on the other, you simply adjust your aim a little bit away from the trouble. And this is really an exercise in basic weighted math, and it was in Every Shot Counts, which I recommend every golfer should be reading. But here's the philosophy behind this. So many golfers do a ton of damage to their score off the tee because of disproportionate penalties. That can be because they're hitting the ball out of bounds, into hazards, fairway bunkers, or even deep rough. So when the course allows it and you have less trouble on one side, there's really two basic rules of thumb to follow. The first is that the bigger the trouble, the more you should aim away from it. So if you have OB on one side and rough on the other, you should adjust your aim more to the safer side. And the second rule of thumb is that based on your skill level, that also is how much you should adjust your aim. So a more skilled driver of the golf ball might be aiming on the left center of the fairway, where a more beginner to intermediate player might actually have to aim in the rough if there is OB on one side of the hole. This plays itself out on so many holes you're playing, and you probably don't even notice it. So whether it's tee shots, layups on par fives, or even some approach shots on greens, take notice where the disproportionate penalties are. And again, those are trees, water hazards, OB, and even fairway bunkers. And if the course is giving you an out, take it. Adjust your aim away from them based on those rules I gave you, and I promise that is a simple way to save strokes over time. Take notice of what's happening when you're under pressure and do the opposite. There's a few normal times during a round where our pressure and anxiety over results can kind of overtake us. That could be on the first tee, it could be when you are having a poor start to the round, or even if you're playing really well and you might break 190 or 80 and that's a big deal for you. But if you take a look at what's happening, you'll notice certain patterns emerging. For example, when I'm playing in tournaments and I'm under the most pressure, I know that I speed things up. One of the ways I found this out was that I usually use an electric caddy when I play, and I have it set on the same walking speed, which is usually a 4 or a 5. And in the tournaments where I'm allowed to use it, I noticed that when it was set at the same number, I was outpacing it and walking in front of it, and I hadn't even realized it. So my tendency when I feel the most pressure is that I speed things up. I walk faster, I go through my routine faster, and then when I'm in those moments, I think about it and I consciously have to slow myself down, which really returns me to my normal state. So you might be the opposite. Some players might slow things down when they feel pressure, but you won't know this until you start paying attention. This is kind of a golden rule in golf for me, where you realize your fault and do the opposite of it, but pay attention to your rounds and what's happening to you when you do feel that pressure, and then you can adjust by doing the opposite. Start practicing more with your long irons. They are actually some of the best training training aids in your bag, and here's why. So long irons put a premium on impact conditions and they give really good feedback. If you're hitting a pitching wedge or 9-iron over and over again, you might get some false feedback on your ball flight, most notably how you're striking it on the club face and start direction. But when you start using a 4, 5, or even 6-iron, things start to get harder. You can't get the ball up in the air as easily. If you don't strike it as well, you're going to be penalized more. So I think a lot of golfers, myself included, get a little too comfortable when they're practicing and they start deferring more to the short and mid irons. And I would tell you that as you work your way through the bag, spend more time with that 5-iron or 6-iron or whatever the longest iron in the bag is for you. You're going to get really good feedback on your ball flight, and more importantly, it's more of a challenge. If you hit a good shot with a 5-iron, it's going to show that you're controlling your impact conditions way better than, let's say, a pitching wedge or even a lob wedge. So don't ignore your long irons when you practice. I believe they are some of the best training aids in the golf industry, and they're already part of your bag. And before I talk to you about why you should use a GPS instead of a rangefinder, let me tell you about the sponsor of this video, Holzkern. With Valentine's Day right around the corner, their watches and jewelry make a perfect gift for both men and women. Everything they make is crafted in small batches that usually sell out pretty quickly. I've been loving my watch for the last few months, and my daughter and wife got a really nice necklace and watch that they are also really loving. So if you're stumped for a Valentine's Day gift and want something that feels really personal, I think your significant other will really appreciate their pieces. All Holzkern jewelry and watches are crafted from natural materials like stone, wood, and gemstones that make each design really unique. And everything they sell does come with a 2-year warranty. So if you want a unique gift for a birthday or anniversary, or you just want a nice new watch like mine, I think you'll be really impressed by the quality and craftsmanship. And no matter where you are in the world, they offer free shipping that usually arrives in 3 to 5 business days. Now, subscribers of my channel are going to get 15% off using the code ShermanGolf and by visiting the link in the description of this video. And all orders placed by February 14th are going to get a free red gift sachet for Valentine's Day. Now let's get back to the video. Start using a GPS watch and ditch the rangefinder. If you look at the purchasing habits of most golfers in the golf industry, the overwhelming distance measuring device choice is a laser rangefinder. But I think it forces golfers into really poor decision making, and it doesn't give them a lot of information. And here's why. I'll give you an example of how this could play out on a hole. So let's say you're playing a par 4 and you pull out your rangefinder for your approach shot, and the pin is in the front left of the green. You shoot it and it's 142 yards, and then you start thinking about the club that you're going to hit that far. But what you didn't think about was that the green is enormous and there is plenty of room behind it. The back of the green might be 165 or 170 yards. And by deferring to that rangefinder number, you've already selected a club and a target that's way too aggressive for your skill level. So one of the things that I always talk about with approach shot play is making things simple and obviously taking more club. So if you had a GPS watch, you would see things like the front yardage, which I think most golfers should completely ignore. You want to think more about the middle of the green and the back number. And on most holes, I would tell you to defer somewhere between the two. So I can't tell you how many golfers I've given this advice to over the years, and they've written me emails that by switching to GPS, they've kind of lowered their scores overnight because they're not making stupid decisions anymore. And another thing I like about GPS, whether it's a watch or even an app on your phone, is that you're getting more information to different targets on the golf course. This could be how far it is to a fairway bunker or other hazards on the course. But more importantly, I just think the GPS is giving you better information on approach shots. Now, I'm not opposed to players using both. I actually do when I play, and there are hybrid rangefinders at this point, which allow you to shoot the pin or another point of the course, and they'll also give you those GPS yardages. But don't let the rangefinder lure you into bad decisions by focusing on the pin too much. This is a cardinal sin that most golfers commit when they're playing. Have clear intentions before you tee off, and more importantly, what you're gonna hold yourself accountable to. And make it really simple. Every time I tee off, I have a really simple list. I'm gonna try and pick smart targets. I'm gonna go through my routine. More importantly, I am not going to give up on my round and maybe a couple of other habits that I know are really important to me. And I think all of you should have a similar list before you tee off. It doesn't need to be long and it doesn't need to be complicated. It could be something as simple as the fact that you're not going to give up today, no matter what happens with how your score and your round unfolds. So think about what that list best is, and as we go through this video, I'll help you build it. But keep it simple, keep it short, and more importantly, what are you going to hold yourself accountable to every time you play golf? This is one of the basic ways of taking your game to the next level. Do way more speed control practice with your putting and use one golf ball. Here's what I mean by that. So when a lot of golfers do actually practice their putting, which is, let's face it, not often for most of us, they usually focus on that 5 to 10 foot range. And I'm not against that type of practice. Making more putts from those distances will lower your scores. There are 3 skills in putting, which are speed control, green reading, and face control on shorter putts to make things simple. I think speed control is the most important one because it's going to reduce the amount of 3 putts, and that's really the main reason a lot of golfers are throwing away strokes on the green. So take some time on the practice screen, and more importantly, use one golf ball because you don't get to hit the same putt over and over again. So what I like to do when I'm practicing speed is kind of cycle through different distances, whether that's 15, 30, or 45 feet, and I'm just kind of randomizing my targets. Now, if you are hitting 3 balls to the same target, after the first putt, you kind of know the answer to the test already because you've already judged the speed and the intention on your first putt, and then you're naturally going to adjust. So it's really not a great way to transfer that skill over to the golf course, where of course you only get one chance to do it. So start spending a disproportionate amount of time of your actual putting practice to speed control and just use one golf ball. If you're in trouble, get out of it quickly. This is the most basic piece of advice that has the highest scoring upside for most golfers. If you're in the trees, if you're near the lip of a fairway bunker, if you're short-sighted on the green and have a really difficult wedge shot, take the easy way out. That could be punching out sideways, taking a higher lofted club in the bunker, or aiming 10 or 15 feet past the pin with that wedge shot. I will hammer this point over and over again in all the videos I make. Your lower scores and your handicap goals are not going to be coming from more birdies or even more pars. They're more about reducing double bogeys. And when you get into trouble situations on the golf course, most importantly, the recovery situations like being in the trees, just get out, play the high probability shot. Don't try and pull off the hero shot that little voice in your head is tempting you to do. It's just going to blow up your scores and keep your handicap stuck in the same place. Be incredibly selective of who you listen to on this platform and plenty of others, and that includes me. So one of the biggest problems with golf advice these days is that there's so much of it, particularly on the golf swing. And there's 2 main problems that arise that I like to focus on. The first is relevance, and the second is continuity. Relevance is a major problem because you just don't know if the swing video you're watching is relevant to your golf swing. They could be talking about shallowing the golf club, which has been really popular over the last decade, but that could be a death move for your golf swing. So the real issue with tips is that you just don't know if they're relevant to the DNA of your golf swing or even other parts of your game. And secondly, continuity is an issue because if you're watching video after video on this platform, and I realize I am part of the problem at times, you don't have continuity, which is really important with golf. So my advice is that if you find a swing coach on here or elsewhere that you like, stick with their advice. If you like my playing skill tips, hopefully stick with mine and don't listen to 10 other people. We have an absolute abundance of information out there, and you need to do your best to set your filter very tight and be selective who you are going to listen to. Have a system for how you're going to align yourself on the range and on the course. I can't tell you how many times I've played golf where I'm standing on the tee box and my playing partner is setting up to their tee shot and they're aimed 45 degrees right of where they think they are, and I tell them that afterwards and kind of show where the club is pointing based on their body and feet lines, and they're shocked and they had no idea. This is one of the biggest problems I see for beginner to intermediate players is that they don't really spend time working on their alignment, and that could really mean a few things. It can be how your feet are aligned, but more importantly, the lines of your shoulders, I believe, are more important. Now, there's no right way to do this. Some people like to be a little more open with their feet or closed, or even having their shoulders point in different directions. But if you're not spending time working on this on the range, and more importantly, transferring the skill over to the golf course, you're going to waste a ton of strokes because that's part of the reason why you're hitting so many shots offline. You're just not aligned properly and you don't even know it. And this is something that I'm always checking in on when I practice. Sometimes when golfers use alignment sticks too much, it's a bit of a crutch. And then when they get on the course and the tee box is pointing them in one direction and their target is in the other, they get really uncomfortable and they can't get their feet and their body set properly. So when you are practicing, yes, use the alignment aids at some point, but then take them away and kind of test yourself and build this personal system. As I said, there are no right answers with alignment. What works for one golfer might not work for another, but you need to figure it out for yourself so that you hit more shots on target while you're playing. Practice the opposite of your fault. As I said earlier, doing the opposite is one of my golden rules for golf, and I call this my fight fire with fire practice method, and it's quite simple. If you are slicing the ball, try and hit a hook. If you're hitting it way too low, try and add loft. If you're hitting it too high, take a wedge and try and de-loft the hell out of it. If you're striking it on the toe of the club, can you try and strike the heel? There's so many ways that we can do the opposite of our inherent fault, and really what that does is it neutralizes the issue. So if you are a slicer of the ball and you explore trying to hit a draw and then go back to your stock shot, hopefully your swing path is a little less out to in. If you've listened to me on my podcast and this channel for a while, you know that that's one of the main ways I reduce my hooks over the year. I just tried hitting a slice and more of a fade, and again, it neutralizes the issue. So whatever you're struggling with in this game, take some of your practice time to do the exact opposite to your fault and kind of experiment with whatever changes you need to make. And I promise it will help the inherent issue over time. Plan as many shots as possible before you get on the course, and it removes indecision. Here's what I mean by that. If you're playing the same course over and over again, or even if you're playing a new course for the first time, you do have the opportunity to go on Google Maps or any of the GPS apps that are very popular right now and start planning out your tee shots. As I said earlier in the video, if you notice there's big trouble on one side, you might want to make some notes on adjusting your aim away from it. You start looking where the fairway pinches and you might need to take less than driver. So do as much homework on the course beforehand, take notes, and more importantly, make as many decisions as possible with what club you're going to select off the tee and what your target is, so that when you're playing, you're not going to have that indecision on the tee box and you know that it's a driver and I'm aiming over there, and you just go through your routine and fire away. Everyone wants to know how they can become more confident on the golf course, and this is a really easy way to do it. So just do your homework beforehand and remove that indecision. And I have plenty of resources on the channel with helping you make better decisions strategically. At some point in your golf journey, you should be taking swing lessons. I think getting customized advice on your golf swing is one of the best investments of your time and money you can make if you are serious about getting better. Now, that doesn't mean you need to work with an instructor forever, but if you can get matched up with a really good swing coach, you can learn more about how your golf swing functions and its unique DNA versus just taking generic swing tips. I got a series of lessons about 12 or 13 years ago that absolutely changed the entire trajectory of my life. If I had never gotten these lessons, I never would have learned a few things about my swing that needed to be fixed, and that set me off on my journey to becoming a scratch golfer, and more importantly, started me on the path of creating game improvement content to help others on their journey in golf. So don't be afraid to ask for help. You don't need to take lessons all of the time, but I think at some point, every golfer who is serious about their game should think about it. Just a quick break in the video to ask for a favor. If you are enjoying this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to subscribe to it. I'm putting a ton of effort into making a new video almost weekly this year, and you don't want to miss them if you're not subscribed. And if you are getting value from these videos, you will get even way more value from my best-selling book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, which you can find on Amazon. Now let's keep going. Another quick mental hack that can work for all of you when you are feeling some anxiety and pressure on the golf course is using your breathing. Now, I've experimented with a ton of different methods over the years when I'm playing tournament golf, when I need it at times. It doesn't mean you need to do deep breathing in every second you're playing, but it could be on the first tee, or as I said earlier in the video, when you start feeling those nerves from scoring milestones, or even if you're playing really poorly, you can do things like the box method breathing, which is doing the same pace over and over again. So it's a 4-count inhale, a 4-count hold, and a 4-count exhale, and you can do that a few times. I also like the 4-7-8 method. Sometimes I'll do that before I tee off in a tournament, where you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. You can also do something like the physiological sigh, which Andrew Huberman really likes, where you take a deep breath through your nose, you hold briefly, and then another one, and then a deep, long exhale through your mouth. So these are some methods that work for me. You can experiment with others. or just do rhythmic breathing in general where you're just kind of counting in your head. I find that if you take a second to do it, whether you're on the tee waiting for a playing partner to hit, or even when you're waiting on the putting green or a group in front of you is taking way too long, you can take a few seconds to kind of focus on your breath, and it's really incredible what it does to your body. It does calm things down. So I think it's one of those secret hacks that every golfer can use when they need it. Start randomizing your club and target selection more when you're practicing. So earlier in the video, I mentioned putting the basket of balls behind you. I think another easy thing you can do when you practice to give more meaning and intent to each shot is just switching targets and clubs here and there. It doesn't mean you need to do it on every single shot, but if you hit a pitching wedge to a target that's, let's say, 120 yards, pull out your 7-iron and choose another green at the driving range and kind of cycle through different clubs. You might want to do this more towards the end of your sessions. I'm fine mixing in some block practice, which is more repetitive style. And as I said, if that basket of balls is behind you, it will help you do that repetitive practice more productively. But another way to do this is just switch things up, or even play performance games as well. That gets you closer to the environment you're gonna see on the golf course where you're not hitting to the same target with the same club over and over again. Take 10 minutes and review your rounds every time you play. This doesn't need to be long or complicated, but I'm always looking back at my rounds when I'm driving home, even in my head, and I'm thinking of a few things. How is my strategic decision making that day? Did anything stick out like a sore thumb where I just picked the wrong target and it cost me? Did I notice any ball striking tendencies? Let's say, was I leaving my drives more to the right or the left? Or was my speed control off? Or perhaps I was more uncomfortable on intermediate wedge shots or thinning my irons more. I'm thinking about any major patterns that I noticed. I'm also thinking about my mental state. Was I down on myself a little bit too much? And more importantly, did I have fun? I think this is one of the most productive habits that any golfer should adopt, is that you don't want to let that information disappear after you play. What a lot of golfers do is they don't take time to imprint the feedback they're getting from their rounds, and then they kind of have a hazy memory that's usually not accurate. So I always tell everyone that all of the clues on how to become better at this game are hiding in plain sight in your rounds. Do not let them disappear. So do a mental review of your round, or even if you need to, journal and write it down. And there's plenty of apps that can help you do that now. Make sure you're not letting the information disappear, and more importantly, you're using it to make better decisions in your next round or in your practice sessions. You don't need a fancy punch shot in the wind. Now, I know a lot of you watching this video play in really windy conditions, and where a ton of golfers lose strokes quickly is when they're hitting into a headwind. And there's really two main factors that are important for playing into the wind. The first thing you need to do is strike it solidly. When you're hitting into the wind, it penalizes any mistakes on club face impact, or more importantly, directional misses. So for example, that slice is going to slice more, and that hook is going to hook more. And if you don't strike your driver solidly, it's just going to get eaten up by the wind. So solid contact is paramount in a headwind. And more importantly, you want to launch the ball lower with less spin. And a lot of golfers think that they need to change their technique, put the ball back in their stance, and have an abbreviated follow through. And if you can pull off that shot, that's great. But I think players do more harm than good when they go outside their wheelhouse and try something that they haven't likely practiced enough to be comfortable with on the golf course. And there's a really simple fix. Just take a lot more club than you think you need. A lot of golfers underestimate the influence of a headwind, and they don't take enough club. And by choosing a 5-iron rather than a 7-iron, you're going to, naturally, it will launch the ball lower with less spin because there's less loft on the club. And if you don't go outside your stock shot, you will have a better chance to strike it solidly. So unless you have a ton of practice time and you have evidence that you can hit the ball better with a punch shot, stick to your normal swing and just take more club. I think you'll see better results in the long run and cost yourself more of those disproportionately bad misses that do occur in headwinds when you don't take the right club and you don't strike it solidly. Be kind to yourself. This is something I always like to remind golfers because I didn't do a good job of this for a long time in my own game. The path of least resistance in golf is to get angry at yourself because your expectations are far out of line. So I'm always trying to remind players and myself that being kind to yourself and having positive self-talk at times when you're playing is a superpower. So if this is a problem for you, and when you do review your rounds, you find that you get very down on yourself, and this is something that we need to actually consciously work on. So if you feel like you're beating yourself up way too much when you play, you need to take a step back and ask yourself, why are you doing this? It's supposed to be fun. And if you're being way too hard on yourself when you play, you do need to reevaluate why you're playing and what you want to get out of this game. But as I said, being a little nicer to yourself on the golf course can have a massive influence on your enjoyment level and your scoring. I think all golfers should explore learning a green reading system at some point. Now, I talked earlier about speed control being the top skill for most golfers on the putting green, but one thing that I noticed in my own game and plenty of other golfers I've played with over the years is that they're really poor at reading the green, and it's costing them a ton of strokes, mostly in 3-putts. Now, about 7 years ago, I learned aim point, and I would say it was about the best 2 hours I've spent in terms of strokes saved over the long run. I know aim point gets a bad rap because announcers are trashing it on TV, but I've found that it actually sped up my green reading process and made me more decisive. Now, it's not for everyone. Some people don't like reading the green with their feet, but it's something that I think golfers should think about and learn from a qualified instructor. Now, another system that is really good is Tour Read from an instructor called Ralph Bauer. Now, that's an app you can download and you can learn it on the fly a bit, and it doesn't really require your feet. You can use it more with your eyes. But I think at some point, like I discussed on lessons, if you are serious about becoming a better golfer, you want to have a system on the greens on how to read putts if it's something you're not good at. If you can't read greens appropriately, you're not getting good feedback on your putts, and you actually can have a poor putting stroke because you didn't read the green properly. So this is something that you could take a few hours to learn, and then it pays off in the long run like aim point has for me. Start doing some max intent driver swings at the end of your practice sessions. So if you look at one of the main reasons why golfers score lower, it's because they can hit the ball farther. It's not about fairways hit. It's more about your distance, and every golfer can unlock 10 to 20 yards if they learn how to move their body faster. So a really simple practice hack is at the end of your range sessions when you're fully warmed up, you don't want to do this when your body's cold, just start swinging at ludicrous speed, and that's a reference to Spaceballs, one of my favorite movies as a kid. Just get after it. Move your body faster than what it's normally used to. Don't worry about how you're striking it. Just try and swing as fast as you can, obviously without hurting yourself. This is a really easy way to add swing speed over time, which is a skill to lower your scores. Do not overlook that. Swing speed is a skill that can be trained, and it has a high correlation to scoring ability. And that leads me to my next point. Prioritize your driver. Now, if I ask most golfers what's the singular most important club in their bag for scoring, they're going to say their putter because they use it so often. But that is really not the case for most golfers. There's a quote that's been around forever that if you can't get off the tee, you can't score. And this was a problem in my game for a long time. It held me back, that I had no confidence in my driver, and I would literally just hit it everywhere. So if this is the case for you and you are avoiding your driver, you are not going to be able to play your best golf. And it's not an easy task to solve. But in terms of the strategic and the practice implications, you really want to make it a priority. And that doesn't mean sitting there wailing on your driver, as I mentioned in the last point, over and over again. You want to do more strategic swing work, whether that's with the help of an instructor or working on some of the methods I discussed in my book or on this channel with strike location, how high you're teeing the ball up, and other things in your setup, and working on your swing path and angle of attack. These are all productive ways to make driver your favorite club in your bag, which I think should be the eventual goal for most golfers. And secondly, strategically, you want to prioritize driver, and I'll borrow a line from my friend Scott Fawcett, who's the creator of the Decade System. He always says that you want to start thinking on every hole driver first, and only find a good reason not to hit it. So sometimes that is when the fairway's pinching at, let's say, where your landing area is, and hitting driver will bring you into too much trouble. But for the most part, you want to hit driver as much as possible to increase your proximity to the holes, so you'll have shorter irons into greens and you'll hit more of them and lower your scores. So don't be like me and avoid your driver for years. You want to make it your best friend and prioritize it in your practice sessions, and more importantly, you want to use it as much as possible on the golf course where it makes sense. Have a 5-minute mobility routine that you can do before you practice or you play. Now, I'm in my early 40s now and my body is not what it used to be, but one thing that I've placed a lot of emphasis on is getting my body ready before I swing a golf club. It doesn't need to be long or complicated, and there's plenty of mobility routines that you can look at on YouTube. Mike Carroll from Fit for Golf is one of my favorite sources, but you're just signaling to your body that you're getting ready to golf. That can be getting your hips loosened up, your spine, or other parts of your body. But the last thing you want to do is start hitting balls and then suddenly you pull a muscle and then it's going to be nagging you for a few weeks. So one of the best habits that any golfers can have is just having this mobility routine where you're going through a little bit of range of motion before you start hitting golf balls, and just stick with it before you get to the range or even start your round of golf. Take a moment in every round to soak it in and be grateful that you are playing golf. If you get to be on a golf course, a few things are going well for you in life. You have the disposable income, you have the time and the physical ability to be out there. Sometimes myself and many others will take golf for granted, but I always like to take a few moments during every round I play just to be grateful that I'm out there. And I always try and mention this on most of my videos because I want to remind all of you and myself that golf is a privilege and we should not take it for granted. So take a few moments, whether it's before you tee off or a few times where you're walking around on the fairways with your friends, and just be grateful that you get to do this thing. Keep your wedge decisions very simple and play more stock shots. Now, if I asked most golfers what better wedge play looks like, they'll say, well, I want to get it within that 3 to 5 foot circle so I can make that easy par. And when you look at the stats and the proximity of tour players, scratch golfers, and even 15 handicaps, no one is really getting it inside of an 8-foot circle on average from just about any distance. What better wedge play looks like for most of you is avoiding double chips and skulls and chunks where you don't get the ball on the green. I always use the 10 to 20 foot distance as a benchmark to ask yourself what type of shot you should play. So whenever you step up to the ball and you're evaluating your lie, and more importantly where the pin is and how much green you have in between you and the pin, you want to ask yourself, what's the shot that gets me on the green most of the time in that 10 to 20 foot circle at worst? And if you could choose that shot more often, you will avoid the double bogeys or worse, because what most players do when they try and get it too close, they'll pick a shot that's just really outside of their skill level. They'll try and add too much loft with a lob wedge and try and flop it, or another technique that they're just not comfortable or familiar with. So as I mentioned earlier in the video with tee shot strategy, where sometimes you're trying to take the easy way out, or when you're in trouble, it's the same thing with your wedges. Keep it simple and go with your stock shots more often rather than trying to do something fancy that's going to cause more harm than it's worth. Keep track of your stats, but only if you're going to take it seriously. I think a lot of golfers have gotten swept up in the stat tracking popularity, and they'll download an app or purchase a system like Arcos and ShotScope and start keeping track of every single shot and think that that in itself will make them a better golfer. It won't. Now, I'm all about stat tracking, whether that's strokes gained off the tee or with approach shots, or seeing while you're 3-putting too much. But the whole point of doing it is getting to your root issue. Is it something in your ball striking that you need to work on? Is it something in your strategic decision making? Or it could be more mental related. So if you do like data and going through analysis, I'm all for doing it, but don't just go through the motions. Get to the root cause of what's holding you back from getting to that next handicap level. And I will provide more resources on how to do that effectively in future videos. Now, the last thing I want to discuss is perhaps the most important and the thing that I wish I knew 25 years ago when I was first taking up this game. After every single shot you hit, whether it's on the range or on the course, you should be asking yourself 3 basic questions. How did I strike it on the club face? How was my turf interaction? And where did the golf ball start, which is really a sign of your club face being too open or closed. This is the main feedback you need on every single shot that will lead you to the right answers in your golf swing and strategic decisions. You always hear myself and Adam Young talking about it on the sweet spot, but you can never get too good at knowing those big 3. And they really are the guiding light in your golf swing with whatever swing changes you're making or on-course adjustments you make. Now, I've covered a ton in this video, and you don't need to do it all. You can pick 1 or 2 of these suggestions and it will make a meaningful impact on your game. And if you want a better summary of it all, a lot of it is from my book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, which you can purchase on Amazon. And the YouTube algorithm thinks that this is my next best video for you to watch.